think let's get to the rapid fire. Fareed, you know the format. Just have fun with the answers. I've got a lot of questions. I should have less, but I really couldn't. So have fun and try to keep the answers a little bit short. And have fun. If you get a call from Trump to join his cabinet, do you accept it?
No.
Why?
Why?
I just don't respect him as a human being. For me, it's a matter of character. I mean, he just embodies a certain set of values that I wouldn't want my son to grow up emulating, and I would find it very hard to justify, being willing to do that. It's not even about policy. Policy one can make adjustments, but character is very hard to adjust.
Will NATO survive 4 years? Yes or no?
Yes. Yes.
On a scale of 1 to 10, define the relevance of the UN in 2024.
Can I go negative on the scale?
Who's more powerful today, Elon Musk or Bill Gates?
Oh, Elon Musk. Elon Musk may be the most powerful private individual in American history.
Okay. And will he likely to remain so in 2028?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, unless he and Trump have a fight, they are both famously volatile people.
Yes.
And so, there may be a kind of lover's tiff.
Fareed, you did your PhD from Harvard under Professor Samuel Huntington. If you were to do a PhD today, what would the subject be?
I still love what I did, American foreign policy, international relations. The logical answer should be artificial intelligence, since everybody now wants to get into artificial intelligence, even though most people don't even know what it means.
Okay. Which country do you bet on to win the chip wars, if there is one winner?
The US, without any question.
What's the number one real fear of a Trump presidency and the number one imagined fear of a Trump presidency?
That's tough. My number one fear is the withdrawal, the broader withdrawal from the world, and the kind of lack of the turning in of the generosity of America towards the world. The U.S. has always had this attitude that, we can have a peaceful world in which we do well by allowing others to do well as well, rather than a kind of Banya-like attitude that says we're going to squeeze everybody else as much as we can. The number one imagined fear, I think the dictatorship idea and the words like dictator and fascist, I think, are thrown around much too loosely. And I think the U.S. has very strong democratic institutions that make that unlikely.
Okay. So we'll play a small game. How will Trump deal with this issue and how should Trump deal with this issue? Now, I'll say the issue, you give me the answer. So how will Trump deal with US dollar and how should he deal with US dollar?
Trump will try to do the impossible, which is to have tariffs, to spend a lot of money, to borrow a lot of money, and still have the dollar go down because he likes the idea of the US being competitive. It's impossible to do those. You should deal with it. My view has always been the US should pursue what it regards as the best economic policy for it. The value of the dollar is a price. Whether it goes up or down is largely irrelevant, and sometimes it'll help exporters, other times it'll help importers. The US president should not worry about that. He should do what's good for the economy. The dollar will end up where supply and demand place it.
How will Trump deal with crypto and how should he deal with crypto?
I think he should have a more benign attitude towards it, with the exception of cracking down on crime, and I suspect that he will. I think that this is an area where the Democrats, again, made a mistake. Why did they come out so strongly against crypto? There are 50 million people in America who own crypto, and they came out against it. And who was on the other side? If you think about this in political terms, what is the constituency of people saying, we need more regulations on crypto? Nobody. Most people don't care. 50 million people who own it feel one way. Why are you taking a position?
Okay. How will Trump deal with and how should Trump deal with Iran?
He will try to exert more pressure and maximum pressure, all the things he said, which is, I think, basically the wrong approach. We already have lots of pressure on Iran. We should maintain a certain amount of that pressure. But we have to have a serious strategy towards a country. You have to also have some carrots for good behavior. You also have some, if there's a box which has 4 walls, no windows, and no doors, you give the Iranians no incentive to in some way moderate their behavior. So, that's the problem here with Iran right now. Where should it go? What is the, if you were a rational Iranian statesman, where do you have incentives to go? And the broadly speaking, the right in America, but Trump in particular, have this policy which is, kind of a fantasy that we just put this pressure on, the Iranian regime will collapse and Thomas Jefferson will rule Iran. That's not going to happen.
So what will he do and what should he do with regards Israel-Hamas?
I think that I would distinguish between what Israel is doing in the north, in Lebanon, and with Iran, where I think it's reestablishing deterrence in a very important and valuable way. The Iranians have been getting away with murder in terms of lobbing, through Hezbollah, these missiles at Israel, terrorizing the population in northern Israel. Completely unacceptable, deeply destabilizing. The Houthis are doing this in the Gulf, diverting shipping. The Israelis are doing the right thing in reestablishing deterrence and stability. I think in the occupied territories, I think he should work towards a two-state solution, which he will absolutely not do. So I suspect he'll do some version of what I'm recommending in the north, but in the occupied territories, it'll actually be the opposite. I suspect that the Israelis will de facto engage in more annexation of territory in the West Bank, making it even more unlikely that there will be a Palestinian state, which is very sad.
And so what should Trump do and what will Trump do with regards to Saudi?
I think what he should do is tell the Saudis, let's make a deal with the Israelis, but let's get the Palestinians a pathway to statehood. I think he will try to make a deal with the Israelis without the pathway. He'll say some rhetorical gestures towards Palestinian rights, greater autonomy in the West Bank, something like that will be enough. And the Israelis would be much happier with that than anything firm. So that's why, again, all the leverage lies with MBS, because, ultimately it's his decision. The danger for the Palestinians is what MBS really wants is the deal with the Americans, which Trump can deliver to him, right? So for MBS, if he gets American security guarantees, maybe he'll relax on the Palestinian issue.
Taiwan. What should Trump do? What will Trump do?
I think he'll follow the Biden policy, which has been very, very strong and consistent. And broadly speaking, American policy has been the same on Taiwan, which is do everything you can to deter the Chinese from attacking, and do everything you can to deter the Taiwanese from declaring independence, because that would trigger a Chinese attack. It's a very difficult balancing act, but there's no way around it.
If Jaishankar were to come to you for advice on how...
Which he won't.
But if he were to come to you for advice on how India should deal with the following countries, what would you say? Canada?
Try to resolve it. It seems to me like there's a very narrow issue on which there is this disagreement. But that's what diplomacy is all about, is finding a way to compartmentalize that so it doesn't spill over into the broader relationship.
Iran?
Continue to have relations with Iran. I think it's in India's interest not to isolate itself, and it needs the oil.
It needs the oil. Russia?
I would continue to have relations with Russia, but I would strategically reorient India's defense and military posture away from Russian equipment, Russian training, Russian security architecture, and that still hasn't happened, as you know. I mean, India still gets, I think, 80% of its advanced weaponry from Russia.
Pakistan?
Look, I would love to see an Indo-Pakistani reconciliation, more trade, more travel between the two countries. This is one of the great tragedies of the world more cricket, exactly. It's one of the great tragedies of the world that these, two people who are really, if not brothers and sisters, at least cousins, have been separated by this, this very cruel divide. And if you just think of it in human terms, it's a real tragedy. And India is the much more powerful country. It has the capacity, it has the leeway to do something, to try to search for some kind of generous reconciliation here. I realize what I'm saying is not going to happen, but you're asking what should it do? Look, if you can end up in a world in which India and Pakistan had much greater people-to-people ties, economy-to-economy ties, sports. I think that would completely transform the subcontinent of India. And frankly, that whole issue of Pakistan becoming China's agent would be deeply compromised. It would be very difficult for even a military government in Pakistan to act in a deeply anti-Indian way, because the two peoples would be so intermingled and intertwined that it would be impossible. And I think that it's very sad the way in which the countries have been divided, the cities have been divided. I mean, Delhi and Lahore are really twin cities, and the fact that they've become, one has become essentially completely one way and the other is another way. It's a very sad thing for, my father spent his entire life wishing that there had never been a partition. I don't know if that was ever, feasible, but the one thing you can do is make these lines less important for people.
Last question, short answer, Bangladesh, after recent drama.
Yeah, it's a very tough one, and I think that the way that India should handle Bangladesh is basically to try to be less involved in Bangladesh, to let Bangladesh try to sort itself out, not take sides, not that I'm saying that it was deeply involved, but there's only downside. If you think about like US and Mexico, things like that, when you're one very big, rich country and you're one very poor, somewhat unstable country, the best thing you can do is just try to be as uninvolved, because otherwise you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. There are going to be conspiracy theories no matter what you do, and the best you can do is just try to be as disengaged as possible, work with whoever happens to be in power.
In Trump 2.0, what will happen to American big tech?
I think by and large American big tech will continue to do fine. It is by far it has such enormous technological and economic advantages that are what is powering its rise. I think it will face some real challenges on the issue of whether or not social media is in fact a publisher of content rather than simply a platform. And on that issue, by the way, I'm sympathetic to what some people like J.D. Vance and Trump say. I think that the idea that Facebook and these groups have been able to get away by saying, we have no responsibility or liability for any of the stuff that appears on here because we're just the platform is outrageous, and it was a mistake from the start. And the internet should be treated much more like the public airwaves or broadcasts or something like that, where if you're utilizing them, you have certain responsibilities in terms of the kind of content you provide. Now, the problem in America is everybody has their own definition of what good content and bad content is.
Yeah, that's part of the game. American big pharma. What will happen to American big pharma?
Well, you have Robert Kennedy, who is, a completely unique new phenomenon. So I would be hesitant to predict. But my own sense, without being an expert on this issue, is that while he has some legitimate instances where it does seem as though Big Pharma has been able to influence the scientific establishment and maybe accelerate some or allow some drugs to get through without that they shouldn't have, by and large, the scientific establishment works on the basis of facts, on the basis of research, on the basis of double-blind trials, and I would hope that you would not replace that with kind of random assertions about causation, which are really all just about correlation. You say, ever since we put fluoride in the water, you have a rise of autism. Well, ever since we've used cell phones, you have a rise of autism. Ever since we've used electricity, you have a rise of cancer. Correlation is not causation. And you'd hope that there would be some very detailed analysis on whether or not there is evidence that there's something in the in the fluoride that's causing that. On the flip side, and you look at a place like Calgary in Canada, where they took the fluoride out of the water in about 10 years ago, and you've had massive increases in tooth decay among children, massive need for intravenous antibiotics that have to be given to teenage kids because of tooth diseases and things like that. So, the truth is medicine is a trade-off. Like every vaccine does have a one in a, some 10,000, 100,000 million people get sick by it, or there are side effects, or there are problems. But you want to be weighing these rationally using aggregate data, not on the basis of some story you heard, about some that tells you, as I said, that there's some strange correlation here.
Trump 2.0, what will happen to Chinese EV companies?
Right now, there is already a 29% tariff on it. So I suspect that unless Chinese EV companies start selling a lot into the US, they won't raise the tariffs. But if they do, he'll raise the tariffs. So, I mean, Trump is, in his bones, he's a protectionist. Yep. That's the he took out an ad in 1985 when he was a real estate developer, and it was all about protectionism. Those are his first expressed political views, are protectionist.
What happens to the world's fight on climate crisis?
Well, it'll have to fight without America. Look, the truth is, no, I'm joking actually, because the American economy is already decarbonizing on very broad grounds. It's trying to move into solar and wind, already has. Battery technology is getting much better. EV usage, hybrids are getting much stronger. The great challenge for climate change, honestly, is China and India and Indonesia. It's not what happens in America. America is already on a fairly green path. The U.S. is using, the U.S. and Europe have managed this extraordinary thing, which is that they are growing economically without adding to their carbon emissions. Their carbon emissions are essentially have plateaued. The rise in carbon emissions is largely taking place in the developing world. And it is coming out of the dirtiest of all fossil fuels, which is coal. Yeah. So the real challenge for climate change is, can you come up with a green technology that is cheaper than coal? If you had a magic wand, that's what you're looking for. Because if you can't find something and it needs to be zero carbon emissions. So unless you can find something that's zero carbon emissions, you're not helping the environment. And unless it's cheaper than coal, it's not going to get adopted in poor countries. So that's the magic formula. I don't think Trump's policies change that much.
Okay, the world is a better place game. So how many years or months before we see these headlines actually appear? Headline number 1, Zelensky, Putin declares ceasefire. Possible
within 6 months.
Okay. Modi, Xi Jinping reach an agreement on border.
I think that is likely harder, largely because of the Chinese. The Chinese have some neuralgic attitude towards that border. They've solved 15 of the 16 border disputes they have with their neighbors. This is the only border dispute they have not solved. And I think it's because it involves, in their conception, Greater Tibet, which for them is caught up with their sense of China as a nation, being, and Tibet, Mongolia, Taiwan, all being part of it. So I think it's on the Chinese side, and therefore I think it's probably less likely, not in the next year.
Okay. Israel and Iran sit down for peace talks.
No chance.
Israel accepts a two-state solution.
5% chance.
Okay.
I mean, by two-state solution, I mean an actual state.
Yes.
5% chance.
Okay. You get the following guests on GPS. What's the most important question you'd put to each one of them? Narendra Modi.
I would ask him what he thinks, how he thinks what is the best way to strengthen and let flourish India's deeply pluralistic nature. The fact that it is a country composed of so many castes, tribes, religions, ethnicities, languages, is the best way to have a single model that people have to aspire towards and all integrate towards? Or is it better to live and let live? And is he following policies that really allow that pluralism to flourish?
Rahul Gandhi?
Is there a way for the Congress Party to go back to being a genuine grassroots organization the way it was before internal party elections were suspended in wherever it was, 1971, because that to me was the great change in the Congress. It went from being a grassroots organization to a court. And I don't think it has ever really found its way back to being that grassroots organization that Gandhi built.
That's a great answer. Kamala Harris.
Why didn't you go on Joe Rogan? And why didn't you, why didn't you, honestly, why didn't you find a way to let people see the authentic you? Because politics has changed. People want authenticity. They don't care about 30-second commercials, good lighting, good audio, good video. They want to see the real you. And if that, and if that means sitting down for a 2-hour podcast, if that means, doing videos off your phone, it's a very interesting shift that the Republicans actually figured out that the Democrats didn't.
Biden?
Why in God's name did you not why did you not fulfill the promise, the implicit promise you made to the American people, which was that you would be a one-term president and you would step down and let there be an open Democratic primary, which would have allowed for the strongest Democratic candidate to emerge?
Super, great answer. Netanyahu.
Why don't you want to go down in history as like Nixon did with the opening to China, as the hawk who was able to secure Israel's future by taking the one albatross that it has off its neck and allowing for a Palestinian state?
Putin.
Oh, gosh. Are you really the richest man in the world, as I think Elon Musk once said?
Xi Jinping.
Xi Jinping, I think the most interesting question for Xi Jinping is, do you believe it is possible for China to have an open, dynamic, bottom-up, individually based economy and a Leninist political system at the same time? Because that's what he's trying to do. And, it seems to me you're trying to do the impossible.
Okay, lovely. Completely different direction. The one thing that you think has improved about Mumbai since you were in Cathedral School, which where I also was, and the one thing that's gotten worse?
Well, I can say this now because I have just, because I've come after a year. The roads in Mumbai with this under the tunnel and the new sea link, are dramatically better than when I grew up. Look, I grew up. You always have a nostalgia about your youth. I think that the kind of I'm looking at my sister here. And so I'm going to pander to her. The lack of attention to preserving Bombay's architectural heritage seems to me a huge tragedy. If you go to Singapore, they've managed to preserve their little hutments and these little chawls that they had and stuff. And Singapore was like was a fueling station on the British Raj. Bombay was the jewel in the crown. And if you look at Ballard Estate and Fort and Colaba, those expressions of Indo-Anglo, Indo-Saracen architecture are the greatest expressions of that architecture in the world. I mean, VT, whatever it's called now, is really one of the most extraordinary buildings in the world. And the way in which we have not preserved all that is really so tragic. I mean, if you look at, the Marine Drive, the way they've allowed all these Art Deco buildings to be altered, defaced, destroyed. And if you look at Miami, and this is America, land of the future, land of destruction, they are perfectly preserved because they are all heritage. Actually, Marine Drive has a more impressive collection of Art Deco buildings than Miami does. But you'd never know it now because, everybody's added a little chatti here and a glass here and a, thing there. And somehow it's all been allowed.